When Sarai Monet walks into the Lancaster Gala in a golden gown, she thinks the biggest scandal will be her love with Adrian. But one secret is about to rewrite both their destinies forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun filtered through the massive windows of the Lancaster estate as Sarai Monet carefully dusted the family portraits that lined the main hallway. At 25, she moved with quiet efficiency. Her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform crisp despite the hours she'd already put in. "Miss Monet," called Mrs. Peterson, the head housekeeper, "don't forget the library. Mr. Adrian will be working from home today." Sarai nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I'll get to it right away." The Lancaster mansion was the largest of the 5 homes Sarai cleaned each week in this wealthy Chicago suburb. 3 stories of old money and older secrets. It paid well enough to help cover her brother's college tuition and their modest apartment rent. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Sarai glanced at her watch. If she hurried, she could clean the library before Adrian Lancaster arrived. Something about the youngest son of the family always made her nervous, not because he was unkind like some of his relatives, but because he wasn't. Unlike the rest of the Lancasters, Adrian actually saw her. He remembered her name, asked about her day, and once even helped her pick up a tray of glasses she'd accidentally knocked over when his mother had startled her. The sound of the front door opening made Sarai's heart skip. Too late. Adrian Lancaster walked in, his tall frame dressed in a casual button-down shirt and designer jeans rather than his usual business suit. At 29, he was the family rebel, the son who'd studied architecture instead of business, who preferred sketching buildings to attending board meetings. "Good morning, Sarai," he said with a smile that seemed to brighten the already sunlit hallway. "Good morning, Mr. Lancaster," she replied, keeping her eyes lowered as she'd been taught. "I was just about to clean the library." "Adrian," he corrected gently, as he always did. "And don't worry about the library just yet. I have some calls to make first." Sarai nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Actually, would you mind bringing some coffee to the greenhouse in about 20 minutes? I'll be done with my calls by then." "Of course, sir." "Adrian," she amended when he raised an eyebrow. As she walked away, Sarai couldn't help but feel his eyes following her. It was probably just her imagination. Men like Adrian Lancaster didn't look twice at women who cleaned their homes. The Lancaster greenhouse stood at the far end of the property, a magnificent glass structure filled with exotic plants from around the world. It was Adrian's sanctuary, the one place his mother Evelyn rarely ventured due to her allergies. Sarai balanced the coffee tray carefully as she pushed open the glass door with her hip. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers. "Just set it down there," Adrian called from somewhere among the greenery. She placed the tray on a small iron table and was about to leave when Adrian emerged from behind a large palm tree, his sleeves rolled up, dirt smudging his hands. "Sorry about the mess," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I was repotting some of the orchids." "It's no problem," Sarai replied, keeping her tone professional despite how the casual, dirt-smudged version of Adrian Lancaster made her heart race. "Will there be anything else?" Adrian poured himself a cup of coffee and gestured to the second cup on the tray. "I was hoping you might join me, actually." Sarai blinked in surprise. "Join you? Sir, I don't think that would be appropriate." "Because you work here?" He took a sip of his coffee. "I won't tell if you won't." Against her better judgment, Sarai found herself sitting across from him. The iron chair was cool against her back as she tentatively reached for the coffee cup. "You rearranged the living room furniture last week," Adrian said suddenly. Sarai nearly choked on her coffee. "I'm so sorry, I thought—" No, he cut in, his eyes warm with amusement. "It's much better now. The sofa catches the morning light and the reading chair isn't blocking the view of the garden anymore." She relaxed slightly. "I just thought it might work better that way. Your mother didn't notice, so I assumed it was okay." "My mother notices everything, but she'd never admit someone else had a better idea." He leaned forward. "You have an eye for design. Where did you learn that?" The question caught her off guard. No one in this house had ever asked about her life before. "I studied interior design for 2 years at community college," she admitted, "before I had to drop out." "Why did you drop out?" The genuine interest in his eyes made her usual caution slip away. "My mother died. Cancer. Someone had to take care of my younger brother, Jason. He was only 16. Adrian's face softened. "I'm sorry. That must have been very difficult." Sarai shrugged, uncomfortable with his sympathy. "We managed. Jason's in college now, studying computer science. And you're cleaning houses instead of designing them." There was no judgment in his voice, only a quiet understanding that made her more uncomfortable than criticism would have. "It pays the bills," she said, standing up. "I should get back to work." Adrian stood too, suddenly closer than she expected. "Sarai—" The greenhouse door swung open, and Evelyn Lancaster strode in, her elegant figure impeccable in a designer suit, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Adrian, darling, I've been looking everywhere for you. The board meeting has been moved up and—" She stopped short at the sight of Sarai. "Oh, I didn't realize you were occupied." "Mother, you remember Sarai," Adrian said, his voice notably cooler than it had been moments before. Evelyn's gaze swept over Sarai as if she were another piece of furniture. "Of course. The maid." She turned back to Adrian. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. Do try to look presentable." With that, she turned and left, the click of her heels sharp against the stone path. "I should go," Sarai said quickly, gathering the coffee cups. Adrian's hand caught hers, warm and surprising. "I'm sorry about that." "It's fine." Sarai gently pulled her hand away. "It's what I am, the maid, not to me," he said softly. She hurried out before he could see how his words affected her. For the next few weeks, Sarai found reasons to avoid being alone with Adrian. She cleaned the library when he was out, scheduled the greenhouse for when he was at work, and kept her eyes down when they passed in the hallway. But fate had other plans. One rainy afternoon, as Sarai was dusting the bookshelves in the massive Lancaster library, the door opened and Adrian walked in, rain dripping from his coat. "I thought you'd be gone by now," he said, shaking water from his hair. "The rain delayed me," she replied, focusing on the books rather than how his wet shirt clung to his shoulders. "I'm almost finished." Instead of leaving, Adrian walked to the fireplace and added another log. "It's pouring out there. Stay until it lets up." As if to emphasize his point, thunder rumbled overhead and the lights flickered. "Great," he muttered. "Power might go out." Sarai set down her duster. "I should check that all the windows are closed upstairs." "I'll come with you," Adrian said, already heading for the door. The East Wing skylights sometimes leak. They worked in companionable silence, moving from room to room, securing windows and closing drapes. In Adrian's studio, Sarai paused before a table covered in architectural drawings. "These are amazing," she said, forgetting herself as she leaned over a detailed sketch of a modern glass and steel structure nestled into a hillside. Adrian came to stand beside her. "It's a sustainable community center. Solar panels in the glass, rainwater collection systems, natural ventilation." "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "The way it works with the landscape, instead of against it." "Exactly." His face lit up with passion. "That's what I've been trying to explain to my father. Architecture should enhance its environment, not dominate it." "And what does your father say?" Adrian's expression darkened. "That I need to stop playing with my drawings and focus on running the family business as I'm expected to do." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "You don't want to run Lancaster Industries? I want to design buildings that matter, not manage investments that only make rich people richer." He ran a hand through his still damp hair. "But in this family, what I want doesn't matter." A crash of thunder punctuated his words, and the lights went out, plunging them into darkness. "Hold on," Adrian said. His hand found hers in the dark, warm and steady. "There are candles in the desk." A moment later, the soft glow of a candle illuminated his face, so close to hers that Sarai could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Better?" he asked softly. She should step back. She should thank him politely and find an excuse to leave. Instead, she found herself saying, "Why did you ask me to have coffee with you that day?" In the candlelight, his smile was both shy and determined. "Because you're the only real person in this house. Everyone else is playing a role. The dutiful son, the perfect mother, the loyal staff. But you move through these rooms like you're just passing through, like none of this matters to you." "It doesn't," she admitted. "It's just a job." "And that's refreshing." His hand was still holding hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "You see this place for what it is. You see me for who I am." "And who is that?" she whispered. "Someone who wants out," he said. "Out of this house. Out of the role they've written for me. Out of this life that isn't mine." The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows that seemed to hide the differences in their worlds. For a moment, they were just a man and a woman, standing close in the dark. "Sarai," he whispered, leaning closer. The lights came back on with a sudden brightness that made them both blink. Sarai dropped his hand and stepped back, reality crashing back. "I should go," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The rain has stopped. Adrian didn't try to stop her, but as she reached the door, he said, "I meant what I said about wanting out." She looked back at him, this handsome, privileged man who thought he understood what it meant to be trapped. It's easier to leave when you have somewhere else to go. Despite her reservations, Sarai found herself drawn into Adrian's world over the following weeks. It started with more coffee in the greenhouse, conversations that stretched longer each time. Then came shared lunches in the staff kitchen when the family was out, books exchanged with notes in the margins, and finally, one evening when she was working late, a dinner in the garden under the stars. "My father wants me to take over as CFO next month," Adrian told her as they sat on a stone bench, sharing takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant. "It's the first step in his 5-year plan to make me CEO. And you don't want that," Sarai said. It wasn't a question anymore. "I've started looking at architectural firms that might hire me." He picked at his pad thai. Most of them laughed. Turns out an architecture degree with no practical experience doesn't get you far, even with the Lancaster name. "So what will you do?" He set down his food and took her hand. "I've been thinking about starting my own firm. Small projects at first, building a portfolio." "That sounds perfect for you," she said, meaning it. "It would mean walking away from everything. The money, the security, the family name." His eyes searched hers. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy to even consider it. What do you think?" "I think—" He hesitated, then leaned closer. "I think I'm falling in love with you, and that makes everything else seem less important." Sarai's heart pounded. This was dangerous territory. "Adrian, we can't—" "Why not? Because you clean my family's house? Because we come from different worlds?" "Yes," she said honestly. "Those are exactly the reasons." He touched her cheek gently. "Those aren't reasons, they're excuses. The real question is whether you feel something for me too." The sensible answer was no. The honest answer was much more complicated. "It doesn't matter what I feel," she said finally. "This can't go anywhere." "It already has," he whispered, and then he was kissing her, his lips gentle but insistent against hers. Sarai knew she should push him away. Instead, her arms went around his neck, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Then it's the best mistake I've ever made," he replied, kissing her again. For 2 months they lived in their own private world. Secret meetings in the greenhouse, stolen kisses in empty rooms, text messages that made Sarai smile at inappropriate moments. It was reckless and wonderful, and completely unsustainable. Reality intruded one crisp October morning when Sarai was cleaning the vents in the main hallway and overheard Evelyn Lancaster speaking to her sister-in-law in the sitting room. "Adrian's been so secretive lately," Evelyn was saying. "I'm worried he's still fixated on that ridiculous architecture dream." "He'll come around," her sister-in-law replied. "The Lancaster Winter Gala is coming up. Why not use that to remind him of his position? Perhaps invite the Harrington girl. She's been eyeing him for years." "Actually," Evelyn's voice brightened, "he mentioned he's bringing someone this year. Wouldn't say who, but he seemed quite serious about her." "Really? Well, that's promising, as long as she's suitable." "Of course she will be. Adrian knows what's expected. He'd never embarrass the family by bringing someone inappropriate." Sarai's hands stilled on the vent cover. Adrian hadn't mentioned bringing anyone to the gala, certainly not her. But then why would he? The help didn't attend family galas. That evening, when they met in their usual spot in the greenhouse, Adrian seemed unusually excited. "I've been wanting to tell you something," he said, taking both her hands in his. "The annual Lancaster Winter Gala is in 3 weeks." "I know," she said carefully. "I've been helping prepare for it. I want you to come with me." Sarai stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "As my date," he clarified, his eyes bright with determination. "It's time everyone knew about us. Adrian, I can't go to your family's gala. I'm the maid. You're the woman I love," he countered, "and I want everyone to know it." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. "Your family will never accept this. Accept me. I don't need their acceptance. I need you." He pulled her closer. "I'm done living their version of my life. I'm submitting my resignation to Lancaster Industries next week. I've already rented office space for my new firm." "You're really doing it?" she asked, hope and fear mingling in her chest. "I really am, and I want you by my side when I tell my family at the gala." He kissed her softly. "Say yes, Sarai." Against every rational thought, she nodded. Yes. The next morning, Sarai was polishing the grand staircase when Adrian walked his mother and aunt to the front door. They were headed to a charity luncheon, but paused in the foyer to continue their conversation. "So, darling," Evelyn was saying, "you must tell us who this mystery woman is that you're bringing to the gala. Your aunt is dying of curiosity." Adrian smiled, looking happier than Sarai had ever seen him in his family's presence. "You'll meet her soon enough? At least give us a hint," his aunt pressed. "Is it someone we know? The Harrington girl, perhaps?" "No, but you've definitely met her." He took out his phone and pulled up a photo. "Here she is." Sarai recognized the picture. Adrian had taken it last week when they'd snuck away for a picnic at the lakefront. She was laughing, her hair loose around her shoulders, the lake sparkling behind her. Evelyn's polite smile froze. "Adrian, who is this?" "That's Sarai," he said, his voice warm with pride. "Isn't she beautiful?" His aunt squinted at the photo, then looked up in shock. "Sarai, you don't mean the girl who cleans the house?" Sarai's hand tightened around the polishing cloth. She should walk away, pretend she hadn't heard, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. Evelyn let out a sharp laugh. "Very funny, Adrian. Now show us who you're really bringing." "I just did," he said, his smile fading. His aunt scoffed loudly. "The maid? You can't be serious." Evelyn's face hardened into a mask of disapproval. "You're joking, right? You're bringing the black maid to our family's gala? That's rich." Sarai's heart pounded in her ears. She should have expected this, but the casual cruelty still stung. Adrian's voice was ice-cold when he replied, "She's not the maid, she's my future." They laughed harder. Evelyn's voice dripped with condescension. "Oh, Adrian, I know you enjoy your little rebellions, but this is too much. What would your father say?" "I don't care what he'd say," Adrian shot back. "I love her, and she's coming to the gala as my date. End of discussion." He turned and strode away, not seeing Sarai standing frozen on the stairs. His mother and aunt exchanged looks of alarm before hurrying out the door, already on their phones, no doubt spreading the scandalous news. Sarai waited until the house was quiet before retreating to the staff bathroom. Her hands shook as she splashed cold water on her face. She should never have agreed to this. Never have let herself believe that someone like Adrian could truly choose someone like her over his family, his wealth, his world. As she dried her face, Sarai looked at her reflection in the mirror and remembered her mother's words from years ago. "You don't back down when you're underestimated. You step in and take up space." Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders. If Adrian wanted her at that gala, she would go. Not as the maid, not as his secret, but as herself. Sarai Monet, a woman worthy of standing beside any man, even a Lancaster. Now she just needed to find a dress that would make them all remember her name. Sarai didn't tell Adrian that she'd overheard his conversation with his mother and aunt. What would be the point? He had stood up for her, and that meant more than she could express. For the next week, she continued her duties at the Lancaster estate as usual, though she noticed the way Evelyn Lancaster's eyes followed her with barely concealed disdain. The other staff members had started whispering too. News traveled fast in a house like this. "Is it true?" Mrs. Peterson asked her one afternoon as they folded linens together. "Are you and Mr. Adrian involved?" Sarai kept her eyes on the sheet in her hands. "Would it matter if we were?" The older woman sighed. "Oh, honey, men like Adrian Lancaster don't marry girls like us. They might have their fun, but in the end they always choose their own kind." "Adrian's different," Sarai said, though a small voice in her head wondered if that was really true. Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. "I hope you're right, dear. For your sake." That evening, when Sarai finished her shift, she found Adrian waiting for her by her car in the staff parking area. "I've missed you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Mother's had me in meetings all week." She leaned into his embrace, allowing herself to believe, just for a moment, that they could overcome the obstacles between them. "Are you sure about the gala? It's not too late to change your mind." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," she lied. "I just don't want to cause problems for you. The only problem would be going without you." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Sarai's heart skipped a beat. "It's not what you think," he said with a smile as he opened it. Inside lay a delicate gold key on a fine chain. "It's the key to our future." "I don't understand." "It's the key to our new office. I signed the lease yesterday." His eyes shone with excitement. "Lancaster Design is officially a reality. I registered the business, ordered furniture, everything." Sarai touched the key with trembling fingers. "You're really doing this?" "I really am. And I want you as my partner. Your eye for interior spaces, my architectural vision. We'd be amazing together. He lifted the necklace from the box. Will you join me, Sarai? Not just at the gala, but in building something new. As he fastened the necklace around her throat, the weight of the key rested against her skin like a promise. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, right there in the parking lot where anyone might see. For once, Sarai didn't care who was watching. The night before the gala, Sarai's small apartment was a flurry of activity. Her brother Jason sat on the couch, watching with amusement as she tried on her third outfit. I still don't see why you won't let Adrian buy you a dress, he said, munching on popcorn. The guy's loaded and it's his fancy party. Sarai shook her head as she examined her reflection in the mirror. The black dress was nice enough, but hardly appropriate for the most prestigious social event of Chicago's winter season. I need to do this on my own terms, she explained. If I show up in a dress he bought, I'm just confirming what they already think, that I'm after his money. Jason rolled his eyes. You're the only person I know who'd make it harder to date a millionaire. He tossed a piece of popcorn at her. So what are you going to do? Because no offense, sis, but nothing in your closet screams high society gala. Sarai sighed and flopped down next to him on the couch. I don't know. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should call Adrian and tell him I can't go. Nope, not happening. Jason stood up and grabbed his jacket. Come on, we're going shopping. We can't afford anything that would work for this. That's why we're not going to the mall. He grinned. We're going to see Grandma Rose. Rose Washington wasn't actually their grandmother, but she'd been like one to them since their mother died. A retired seamstress who had once worked for some of Chicago's finest families, she lived in a small house filled with fabrics, patterns, and a lifetime of stories. Well, well, she said when Sarai explained the situation. So you're going to walk into the lion's den, are you? Something like that, Sarai admitted. Rose circled her, eyeing her critically. Those Lancaster women are vicious when they want to be. I worked for Evelyn's mother back in the day. Cut from the same cloth, those two. Maybe this is a bad idea, Sarai said, her confidence wavering again. Nonsense. It's a wonderful idea. Rose's eyes twinkled. Nothing I love more than seeing those high society types get their feathers ruffled. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a large garment bag. I've been saving this for something special. Inside the bag was the most beautiful dress Sarai had ever seen, deep gold fabric that seemed to glow from within, with a design that was both elegant and dramatic. I made this years ago for a client who never picked it up, said it was too bold. Rose scoffed. What she meant was she didn't have the presence to wear it. But you do. Sarai touched the fabric reverently. I can't take this. You can, and you will. Consider it an early Christmas present. Rose pushed her toward the bathroom. Go try it on, and take those hair clips out. Your natural hair will be perfect with this. When Sarai emerged, both Jason and Rose fell silent. Wow, Jason finally said. You look like royalty. Rose nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. That's exactly what we're going for. Now let's talk accessories and shoes. You can't be limping around in borrowed heels all night. By the time they left Rose's house, Sarai had not just a dress, but a complete transformation planned. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel excited about the gala. Maybe, just maybe, she could pull this off. The day of the Lancaster Winter Gala arrived with a light snowfall that blanketed Chicago in white, as if setting the stage for the evening's drama. Sarai spent hours getting ready, applying her makeup with more care than she ever had before, styling her natural hair into an elegant updo that Rose had taught her. When she finally slipped into the gold dress, she hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. Gone was the maid in her simple uniform. In her place stood someone regal, powerful, beautiful. Jason whistled when she walked into the living room. If those rich snobs don't eat their hearts out, they're blind. Sarai laughed, but her stomach was in knots. Adrian's sending a car. He wanted to pick me up himself, but his father insisted he'd be there early to greet guests. Their loss, Jason said. He handed her a small box. This is from me, not much, but I thought it might help. Inside was a delicate pair of earrings, simple gold studs that would complement her dress perfectly. Mom's earrings, she whispered. Jason, I can't. She'd want you to wear them tonight. He hugged her carefully, avoiding messing up her hair. Go show them who Sarai Monet really is. The Lancaster estate had been transformed for the gala. Thousands of twinkling lights illuminated the snow-covered grounds, and inside, the grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and lavish decorations. Guests in formal attire mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, a sea of wealth and privilege that would have intimidated Sarai on any other day. But not tonight. The driver Adrian had sent opened her door and offered his hand. "Miss Monet," he said with a respectful nod that gave no indication he knew she was usually in a maid's uniform rather than a golden gown. Sarai took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The cold winter air kissed her face as she made her way up the illuminated path to the main entrance. Guests turned to look at her, curiosity in their eyes. She recognized some of them, people whose homes she had cleaned, whose children she had smiled at, whose lives she had moved through invisibly. Until now. At the door, a uniformed attendant checked her invitation, the one Adrian had personally delivered to her apartment with a bouquet of roses. "Miss Monet," he announced, and she stepped into the ballroom. The effect was immediate. Conversations paused, glasses stopped midway to lips, heads turned to stare at the stunning woman in gold who had just entered. Sarai's eyes found Adrian instantly. He stood near the main staircase with his parents, greeting guests. When he saw her, his face transformed with a smile so bright it rivaled the chandeliers overhead. He excused himself and crossed the room to her, oblivious to the whispers that followed in his wake. When he reached her, he took her hands in his, eyes drinking her in. "You're breathtaking," he said softly. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, taking in his tailored tuxedo and the open admiration in his eyes. "I can't believe you're really here." He brought her hand to his lips. "With me? Where else would I be?" she said, her confidence growing under his gaze. Adrian tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "Come on, there are some people I want you to meet." As they moved through the crowd, Sarai was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers, the double takes from people who were trying to place where they'd seen her before. She held her head high, remembering her mother's words about taking up space. They approached Adrian's parents, who stood with tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Harold Lancaster, Adrian's father, was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and cold eyes. Beside him, Evelyn's face was a mask of polite disdain. "Mother, father," Adrian said, his voice steady, "I'd like to formally introduce you to Sarai Monet. My date for the evening." Harold's eyebrows rose slightly. "Miss Monet, Adrian has told us very little about you." "I believe we've met, Mr. Lancaster," Sarai said, offering her hand. "I've worked in your home for the past year." His handshake was brief and cold. "Ah, yes, the cleaning staff." "Sarai is much more than that," Adrian interjected. "She's a talented interior designer." Evelyn's laugh was like ice cracking. "How charming. And now she's designed her way into our gala." Her eyes swept over Sarai's dress with calculated assessment. "That's quite a gown for someone on a maid's salary." Before Sarai could respond, Adrian's cousin Marcus appeared at Evelyn's side, a smirk on his handsome face. "So it's true," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Adrian's really brought the help as his date. Bold move, cousin." Sarai felt Adrian tense beside her, but she squeezed his arm gently. This was her battle to fight. "I may be the help, as you put it," she said calmly, "but at least I earn my place in this world, instead of simply being born into it." Marcus's smirk faltered. Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private." "There's nothing to discuss," Adrian said firmly. "Sarai is my guest, and she will be treated with respect." Evelyn's smile was brittle. "Of course, darling. We're nothing if not polite." She turned to Sarai with ice in her eyes. "Do enjoy the party, Miss Monet. I'm sure it's quite an upgrade from your usual evenings." With that, she swept away, pulling Harold with her. Marcus lingered just long enough to mutter, "This ought to be entertaining," before following them. Adrian turned to Sarai, apology in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. They're exactly what I expected," she finished for him. "It's okay, I didn't come here for their approval." He smiled, relief washing over his face. "Have I told you how amazing you are?" "Not in the last 5 minutes," she teased. "You were always the most beautiful woman in the room," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Tonight they finally get to see what I already knew." The orchestra began to play, and Adrian extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Monet?" Sarai placed her hand in his. "I thought you'd never ask, Mr. Lancaster." As he led her onto the dance floor, she was aware of the eyes following them, the whispers behind jeweled hands. But when Adrian took her in his arms and they began to move to the music, the rest of the room faded away. In that moment, it was just the two of them, dancing to a rhythm that was entirely their own. The evening progressed with a surreal quality. Sarai danced with Adrian, sipped champagne that cost more than her weekly salary, and even found herself in conversations with guests who seemed genuinely interested in her background in interior design. Not everyone was welcoming, of course. Some of the women who had previously ignored her existence now shot her venomous looks. She overheard snippets of cruel gossip as she passed by certain groups, but for every cold shoulder, there was someone else who seemed to appreciate the disruption to the usual social order. "You've certainly caused quite a stir," said an elderly woman who introduced herself as Beatrice Harrington. "Most excitement this stuffy crowd has seen in years." Sarai smiled. "That wasn't my intention." "No, dear, I can see that. You're here for him." Beatrice nodded toward Adrian, who was speaking with some business associates across the room. "He looks happier than I've ever seen him." "Thank you for saying that," Sarai said, touched by the unexpected kindness. As the evening wore on, Sarai excused herself to find the powder room. The hallway outside the ballroom was blissfully quiet after the noise of the party. She was just about to enter the ladies' room when she heard voices around the corner. Evelyn Lancaster and her sister-in-law. "It's a disaster," Evelyn was saying. "Everyone is talking. The Harringtons, the Sullivans, everyone who matters." "Calm down, Evelyn. It's just a phase. Adrian's always been rebellious." "This isn't rebellion. You should see the way he looks at her. He's actually serious about this Maid. Well, she is quite beautiful," her sister-in-law admitted. "And poised. I was expecting someone much more obvious." "That's what makes it worse," Evelyn hissed. "If she were just after his money, we could buy her off, but she actually seems to care about him. So what are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes to end this embarrassment before it goes any further," Evelyn said, her voice hardening. Harold's speaking to Adrian now, reminding him of his responsibilities to the family name. Sarai had heard enough. She turned to go back to the ballroom when she nearly collided with Adrian. "There you are," he said, then frowned at her expression. "What's wrong?" Before she could answer, Evelyn and her sister-in-law rounded the corner. Evelyn's face tightened at the sight of them together. "Adrian," she said stiffly, "your father is looking for you." "I just spoke with him," Adrian replied, his arm slipping protectively around Sarai's waist. He made his position quite clear. "And?" Evelyn prompted. "And I made mine equally clear." His voice was calm but firm. "I'm resigning from Lancaster Industries. I'm starting my own architectural firm, and I'm doing it with Sarai by my side." Evelyn's face paled. "You can't be serious. You'd throw away your inheritance, your future, for some fling." "This isn't a fling, Mother. I love her." The words hung in the air between them. Sarai's heart swelled, even as anxiety twisted in her stomach. This was all happening so fast. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she turned to Sarai. "You don't have to worry about how it will look, Mrs. Lancaster," Sarai said before Evelyn could speak. "I don't want your legacy. I'll build one of my own." She turned to walk away, Adrian's hand firmly in hers, but Evelyn wasn't finished. "So what is this?" she called after them, her voice shrill with frustration. "A charity project for him." Sarai stopped and turned back slowly, feeling a calm certainty settle over her. "No. If anything, I'm the one teaching him how to stand up." From the doorway of the ballroom, someone started clapping. Then another person joined in, and another. Guests had gathered in the hallway, drawn by the raised voices, and many of them were now applauding Sarai's words. Evelyn's face flushed with humiliation. Without another word, she pushed past them and disappeared down the hallway, her sister-in-law hurrying after her. Adrian looked at Sarai with wonder. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" She smiled up at him. "You might have said something about it." He leaned down to kiss her, right there in front of everyone, and the applause grew louder. Later, as the party began to wind down, Sarai found herself alone for a moment, catching her breath on a small balcony off the ballroom. The winter air was crisp, but she welcomed the coolness against her flushed skin. The sound of the balcony door opening made her turn. An elderly man stood there, his frail figure silhouetted against the light from inside. She recognized him as William Lancaster, Adrian's grandfather and the family patriarch. He rarely left his private wing of the house, and Sarai had only glimpsed him a few times during her year working at the estate. "Miss Monet," he said, his voice surprisingly strong for a man his age. "May I join you?" "Of course, Mr. Lancaster," she replied, curious about why he would seek her out. He moved slowly to stand beside her at the railing, his eyes fixed on the snow-covered gardens below. "You've caused quite a commotion tonight." "I seem to be hearing that a lot," she said with a small smile. "Good. This family needs shaking up now and then." His gaze shifted to her face, studying her intently. "Your mother, what was her name?" The question caught her off guard. "Celeste. Celeste Monet." William Lancaster's face changed. a mix of shock and something that looked almost like hope. "Celeste," he repeated softly. "From the South Side. Father was a jazz musician." Sarai stared at him, stunned. "Yes, my grandfather played saxophone at the Blue Note in the 70s. How did you know that?" The old man's hands gripped the railing tightly. "Because I used to go hear him play, every Friday night." His voice grew distant with memory. "That's where I met your mother. She was working as a hostess while studying at the Art Institute." Sarai's mind raced. "You knew my mother?" William nodded, his eyes now bright with unshed tears. "Celeste was the only woman I ever loved. My family found out and they made me leave her. They threatened to cut me off, to ruin her career. I was a coward. I chose the family business over love." He looked at her directly now. "She got pregnant, and I never knew what happened." The world seemed to tilt beneath Sarai's feet. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I think you might be my granddaughter." Sarai shook her head in disbelief. "That's not possible. My father was James Walker. He left when I was 3. "James Walker?" William looked confused, then understanding dawned. "James was Celeste's cousin. He always looked out for her." The old man's voice broke. "She must have asked him to claim you as his when I didn't come back." Sarai's mind whirled with memories. Her mother's reluctance to talk about her father, the way she would change the subject whenever Sarai asked questions, the old photographs where she couldn't see herself in James Walker's features. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, though a part of her already did. William reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded photograph. "I carried this for 50 years. The photo showed a young William with his arm around a beautiful black woman, with Sarai's eyes and smile. They were standing in front of a jazz club, both looking radiantly happy. "My mother," Sarai whispered, touching the photo with trembling fingers. "I tried to find her years later after my wife died, but she had moved away." William's voice was heavy with regret. "I never knew about you. If I had..." The balcony door opened again, and Adrian appeared. "Grandfather? Mother's looking for you." He paused, taking in the scene before him. "Is everything okay?" William looked from Sarai to Adrian and back again. "I think it will be." As the three of them stood there in the cold night air, the sounds of the party fading behind them, Sarai felt as though her entire world had been turned upside down. Yet somehow, for the first time in her life, things were finally falling into place. The revelation on the balcony changed everything. "What's going on?" Adrian asked, looking between his grandfather and Sarai with confusion. William Lancaster took a deep breath, his aged hands still clutching the faded photograph. "Adrian, I believe Sarai is my granddaughter. Her mother, Celeste, and we were in love once, long ago." Adrian's eyes widened. "Grandfather, are you sure?" "I'm not sure of anything anymore," William admitted. "But look at her eyes, Adrian. They're exactly like Celeste's." Before they could discuss it further, the balcony door opened again. Evelyn Lancaster stood there, her face a mask of cold fury. "Father, you need to come inside. You'll catch your death out here." Her eyes darted suspiciously between her father-in-law and Sarai. "What's going on?" William straightened his shoulders. "Evelyn, I was just getting to know Adrian's young lady. She reminds me of someone I used to know." Evelyn's lips thinned. "Well, the party is winding down and we have guests waiting to say goodbye." She turned to Sarai, her voice dropping to a frosty whisper. "I think you've caused enough of a spectacle for one evening, don't you?" "Mother," Adrian warned, but Sarai touched his arm gently. "It's fine," she said. "It's getting late anyway." She turned to William. "It was a pleasure speaking with you, Mr. Lancaster." The elderly man nodded, tucking the photograph back into his wallet. "We'll talk more soon, my dear." As they made their way back inside, the ballroom had indeed begun to empty. Groups of guests were collecting their coats and saying their goodbyes. Many eyes still followed Sarai as she moved through the room, but she hardly noticed now. Her mind reeling from William's revelation. Could it be true? Was she actually a Lancaster by blood? The idea seemed too incredible to believe, yet something deep inside her resonated with the possibility. It would explain her mother's reluctance to discuss her father, the mysterious sadness that sometimes came over her when Sarai asked about her past. "Are you okay?" Adrian asked quietly as they stood near the grand staircase, watching guests depart. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "It's a lot to take in." He squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, whatever the truth is, it doesn't change how I feel about you." She smiled gratefully, but inside a small worry began to grow. If she really was William Lancaster's granddaughter, what did that mean for her and Adrian? The thought was too unsettling to examine closely. As the last guests left, Harold Lancaster approached them, his expression stern. "Adrian, a word in my study. Now, whatever you have to say to me you can say in front of Sarai," Adrian replied firmly. Harold's jaw tightened. "This is family business." "Then Sarai should definitely be there," William's voice came from behind them. He had been watching from the doorway. "Especially if what I suspect is true." Harold looked at his father-in-law with confusion. "What are you talking about, William?" "I think it's time for some long-overdue truth, Harold, for all of us." The elderly man's voice carried an authority that even Harold couldn't ignore. "Let's take this to the study, shall we?" The Lancaster study was a room Sarai had cleaned hundreds of times, but she'd never sat in one of its leather armchairs before. The walls lined with books and hunting trophies seemed to close in around her as the family gathered. Harold and Evelyn sat together on one sofa, their postures rigid with disapproval. Adrian sat beside Sarai on another, his hand firmly holding hers. William took the large armchair by the fireplace, looking suddenly frail in the low light. "Would someone please explain what's going on?" Harold demanded. William sighed heavily. 50 years ago, I fell in love with a young black woman named Celeste Monet. My father, your father Evelyn, found out and threatened to disown me if I didn't end it. I was a coward. I chose the family fortune over love." He looked at Sarai. "Celeste was pregnant when I left her. I never knew, but now I'm certain that Sarai is my granddaughter." The room fell silent. Evelyn's face had gone white. Harold looked stunned. Adrian's hand tightened around Sarai's. "This is absurd," Evelyn finally sputtered. "You can't possibly believe this. This cleaning woman is part of our family?" "Look at her, Evelyn," William said quietly. "Look at her eyes. They're exactly like Celeste's." "This is preposterous," Harold interjected. "Even if there was some indiscretion in your past, William, there's no proof that Miss Monette is related to you." "We can do a DNA test," Adrian suggested. "If grandfather and Sarai are willing." William nodded. "I am." All eyes turned to Sarai. She felt dizzy with the implications. If it was true, she wasn't just the maid who had fallen for the millionaire's son. She was a Lancaster, denied her birthright, cleaning the floors of a home that should have been partly hers. I need time to think," she said, standing abruptly. "This is too much." "Sarai, wait," Adrian said, rising to follow her. "Please, I just need some air." She moved toward the door, but Evelyn's cold voice stopped her. "If you think this changes anything, you're mistaken," she said. "Even if, and that's a very big if, you have some Lancaster blood, it doesn't make you one of us. You weren't raised in this world. You don't belong here." "Mother!" Adrian exclaimed, but Sarai turned back, a strange calm washing over her. "You're right, Mrs. Lancaster. I wasn't raised in your world. I was raised by a mother who worked 3 jobs to put food on our table, who taught me that character matters more than money, who loved me enough for 2 parents. Her voice grew stronger. "If I am a Lancaster by blood, it doesn't change who I am. And if I'm not, it doesn't change how I feel about Adrian or how he feels about me." With that, she walked out, head held high. Adrian found her in the greenhouse, sitting among the orchids that he loved to tend. The warm, moist air enveloped them, creating a small sanctuary away from the chaos inside the house. "I'm sorry about all of this," he said, sitting beside her. "My mother was out of line." "She's scared," Sarai replied. "They all are. I'm disrupting their perfect world." "Their world is far from perfect, believe me." He took her hand. "Are you okay?" She looked down at their intertwined fingers, his pale, hers dark yet fitting together perfectly. "I don't know. I spent my whole life believing James Walker was my father. He wasn't around much, but he was still part of my story. Now I find out it might all have been a lie." "Not a lie," Adrian said gently. "Maybe your mother was protecting you, protecting herself. From your family," Sarai pointed out, "from the shame of having a child with a married white man from a powerful family." Adrian couldn't deny it. "Things were different 50 years ago. Some things haven't changed that much," she sighed. "If I really am a Lancaster, what does that make us, Adrian? Some kind of distant cousins?" He squeezed her hand. "It makes us 2 people who found each other against all odds. Nothing more, nothing less." He lifted her chin gently. "I don't care if you're a Lancaster or a Monet or both. I love you, Sarai. That's all that matters to me." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. "I love you too, but this changes things. You must see that. The only thing it changes is that my grandfather might get a chance to know his granddaughter after 50 years of regret." He kissed her forehead. "Let's take the DNA test. Let's find out the truth, and then we'll face whatever comes next together." Sarai nodded, though doubt still lingered in her heart. "Okay, The next day, Sarai called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She needed space to process everything that had happened. Adrian had offered to come over, but she asked for time alone, and he respected her wishes. Her brother Jason sat across from her at their small kitchen table, struggling to absorb what she'd told him. "So let me get this straight," he said, running a hand through his short hair. "Your boyfriend's grandfather thinks he might be our grandfather too." "That's the short version, yes," Jason whistled low. "And if it's true, that makes you—" "A Lancaster," Sarai finished, "at least by blood." "Man, that's wild." He shook his head in disbelief. "So what happens now? They going to invite you to move into the big house, give you a trust fund, make you change your name?" Sarai frowned. "This isn't a joke, Jason." "I'm not joking. I'm trying to understand what this means for you, for us." He leaned forward. "If this old guy is really your grandfather, doesn't that mean you're entitled to some of the Lancaster fortune?" "I don't want their money," Sarai said firmly. "Maybe not, but you deserve it. Think about how Mom struggled to raise us. Think about the chances you gave up to take care of me after she died." His expression grew serious. "If these people owe you something, you should get what's yours." Sarai hadn't thought about it that way. She'd been so caught up in what the revelation meant for her relationship with Adrian that she hadn't considered the broader implications. "I don't know, Jason. It feels wrong somehow." "What's wrong is that you've been cleaning their toilets when you should have been treated like family." He stood up and grabbed his jacket. "I've got class, but think about it, okay? This could change everything for us." After Jason left, Sarai sat alone in the quiet apartment, turning the situation over in her mind. She had always been proud of making her own way in the world, of standing on her own 2 feet. The idea of claiming anything from the Lancasters felt uncomfortable, almost dirty, yet there was truth in what Jason said. If William Lancaster had stayed with her mother, if he'd acknowledged his child, how different would their lives have been? Would her mother still be alive, or would the strain of raising 2 children alone have worn her down as it did? Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. "Grandfather's arranged for the DNA test tomorrow at 2 p.m. if that works for you. I can pick you up." She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I'll be ready." The private medical clinic was discreet and luxurious, the kind of place where celebrities and politicians went to avoid public attention. William Lancaster was already there when Adrian brought Sarai in, sitting in a comfortable chair while a nurse prepared the testing materials. "Thank you for coming, my dear," he said, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "I know this must be difficult for you." Sarai nodded, suddenly nervous. "I just want the truth, Mr. Lancaster." "William, please." He gestured to a chair beside him. "Whatever the results, I want you to know how sorry I am for what happened all those years ago. Your mother deserved better from me." "She never spoke badly of you," Sarai said, surprising herself with the admission. "Whenever I asked about my father, she would just say that he was a good man who couldn't be with us. I always thought she was making excuses for James Walker." William's eyes filled with tears. Celeste always saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. The procedure was simple. Cheek swabs from both William and Sarai, carefully labeled and sealed. "The results will take a few days," the doctor explained. "We'll call you as soon as we know." As they left the clinic, Adrian suggested lunch at a nearby restaurant. "It might be good to talk in neutral territory," he said. The restaurant was quiet and upscale, with private booths that offered seclusion. Once they were seated, William seemed to gather his courage. "Sarai, there's something I want to ask you, regardless of what the test results show." She tensed slightly. "What is it?" "I want to make amends, not just to you, but to honor your mother's memory." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is the deed to a building I own downtown. It's a beautiful old Art Deco structure that I've held on to for sentimental reasons. Celeste and I used to talk about renovating it someday." He slid the envelope across the table. "I want you and Adrian to have it for your new design firm." Sarai stared at the envelope without touching it. "I can't accept that." "It's not charity," William insisted. "It's an investment in both of you. And," his voice grew softer, "it's what I should have done for your mother 50 years ago." Adrian looked as surprised as Sarai felt. "Grandfather, that building must be worth millions. What good is money if you can't use it to right old wrongs?" William asked. "I'm an old man, Adrian. I've spent too many years following the rules set by people who cared more about appearances than happiness." He looked at Sarai. "I see so much of Celeste in you. Her dignity, her strength. I failed her, but perhaps I can do better by her daughter." Sarai felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I appreciate the gesture, I really do, but I can't take something so valuable from you, especially before we even know if I'm really your granddaughter. Then consider it a loan, William suggested. If the tests are negative, you can pay me back over time, with a reasonable interest rate. If they're positive, he shrugged, consider it a very late inheritance. Adrian reached for Sarai's hand under the table. It would be an amazing opportunity for us, he said quietly. A chance to start our firm with a real presence downtown. She looked between them, torn between pride and practicality. The building would give their fledgling business an incredible start, but it felt like accepting defeat somehow, like admitting she couldn't make it on her own. I need to think about it, she finally said. William nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, the offer stands, whatever you decide. As they finished their meal, Sarai's phone rang. It was Mrs. Peterson from the Lancaster estate. Sarai, dear, I'm sorry to bother you on your day off, but there's been quite a scene here, the housekeeper said, her voice hushed and worried. Mrs. Lancaster is on the warpath. She's fired 2 staff members already today, and she's threatening to let more go. What happened? Sarai asked, concerned for her co-workers. It's about you, dear. After you left with Mr. Adrian and Mr. William this morning, she went through your work records, looking for mistakes. When she couldn't find any, she started claiming you've been stealing time, taking too long on your breaks. Mrs. Peterson's voice dropped even lower. She's saying she's going to fire you as soon as you return. Sarai felt a cold anger settle in her stomach. I see. I thought you should know before you came back, Mrs. Peterson continued. It's not right what she's doing. Thank you for telling me. Sarai hung up and looked at Adrian and William. It seems your daughter-in-law is planning to fire me when I return to work. William's face darkened. Evelyn has always been threatened by anything that disrupts her control. Adrian shook his head in disgust. This has gone too far. I'll talk to her. No, Sarai said firmly. This is my battle to fight. She straightened her shoulders. I think I need to pay Mrs. Lancaster a visit. The drive back to the Lancaster estate was tense. William had insisted on coming along, despite Adrian's concerns about his health. I've let Evelyn bully this family for too long, the elderly man said, as they pulled up to the mansion. It's time someone stood up to her. Evelyn Lancaster was in the conservatory when they arrived, arranging flowers with precise, angry movements. She looked up as they entered, her expression hardening at the sight of Sarai between Adrian and William. Well, she said coldly, the prodigal family returns. I hear you've been looking for reasons to fire me, Sarai said, getting straight to the point. Evelyn snipped a rose stem with particular force. I don't need reasons. You work at my pleasure, and I no longer find your presence here pleasurable. You can't fire her, Mother, Adrian said, not without proper cause. I have cause. She's been a disruptive influence. The other staff can't focus with all this drama going on. Evelyn set down her scissors and faced them directly. Besides, wouldn't it be inappropriate for her to continue working as a maid if she's going to pretend to be a Lancaster? She's not pretending anything, William said, his voice sharp. And if the DNA test confirms what I believe, Sarai has more right to the Lancaster name than you do, Evelyn. Evelyn's face flushed with anger. How dare you? I've devoted my life to this family, to maintaining our position, our reputation. No, William countered. You've devoted your life to appearances, to what other people think. You never understood what really matters. And what's that? Evelyn asked scornfully. Love? Is that why you've been pining for your lost black mistress all these years, even while married to my mother? William flinched at the cruelty in her words, but stood his ground. Yes, love, something you've never understood. I made the mistake of choosing family obligation over love once. I won't let you force Adrian to make the same mistake. Sarai stepped forward, her voice calm despite the tension crackling in the room. Mrs. Lancaster, I didn't come here to fight. I came to resign. All 3 Lancasters looked at her in surprise. I won't work where I'm not respected, Sarai continued. And clearly that's the case here. Evelyn's smile was triumphant. Well, that solves one problem. But I'm not going away, Sarai added. Whether I'm a Lancaster by blood or not, Adrian and I are starting a business together. We're building a future together. You can choose to be part of that future or not. That's up to you. Evelyn's smile faltered. You really think you can just waltz into our lives and take my son away from everything he's been raised for? I'm not taking him anywhere he doesn't want to go, Sarai replied. Adrian has his own dreams, his own vision for his life. Maybe it's time you actually listened to him. Adrian moved to stand beside Sarai, his arm sliding around her waist. She's right, Mother. I've been trying to tell you and Father for years that I don't want to run Lancaster Industries. I want to design buildings, create spaces that make a difference in people's lives. With her? Evelyn asked bitterly. Yes, with Sarai. Adrian's voice was firm. I love her, and if you can't accept that, if you can't see past your prejudices and really get to know her, then you'll be the one missing out. William stepped forward, placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn, listen to me. I've made many mistakes in my life, but the greatest was letting my father dictate who I could love. Don't make Adrian repeat my mistakes. Don't let your pride cost you your son. For a moment something flickered in Evelyn's eyes, a hint of uncertainty, perhaps even fear, but it was quickly replaced by her usual cold control. You're all being ridiculous, she said, turning back to her flowers. Adrian will come to his senses eventually, he always does. Adrian shook his head sadly. Not this time, Mother. I've already submitted my resignation to Father. I start clearing out my office tomorrow. And I've decided to accept William's offer, Sarai added, surprising herself with the decision. We'll be taking the downtown building for our new firm. Evelyn's hands stilled on the flowers. William's offer? What offer? William straightened, looking every inch the patriarch despite his age. I'm giving them the Wabash Avenue building, Evelyn. It's mine to give, and I've decided they should have it. That building is part of the Lancaster portfolio, Evelyn protested. Harold won't allow this. The building is in my name alone, William said calmly, and while we're on the subject of ownership, I think it's time I revisited my will as well. The implications of his words hung in the air. Evelyn's face paled. You would disinherit your own family for her? She pointed a trembling finger at Sarai. No, Evelyn. I'm simply acknowledging what may be the truth, that Sarai is my family too. William's voice was gentle but firm, and it's time we all face that possibility with grace rather than anger. The sound of the doorbell interrupted the tense standoff. A moment later, Mrs. Peterson appeared at the conservatory door. Excuse me, she said nervously. There's a young man at the door asking for Miss Monet, says he's her brother. Sarai frowned. Jason, what's he doing here? They all moved to the grand foyer, where Jason stood looking uncomfortable in his college sweatshirt and jeans. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarai surrounded by Lancasters. Jace, what's wrong? Sarai asked, immediately concerned by his agitated expression. I found something, he said, holding up a small wooden box. After you told me about all this, I started going through Mum's old things in the storage locker. I found this hidden in a false bottom of her jewelry box. He handed the box to Sarai. It was carved wood, worn smooth with age. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside lay a stack of yellowed letters, a small velvet ring box, and a black and white photograph she'd never seen before. The photo showed her mother, young and radiant, standing beside a handsome young man who was unmistakably William Lancaster. Between them, they held a tiny baby. Turn it over, Jason urged. On the back, in her mother's elegant handwriting, were the words, William, Celeste and baby Sarai, June 1970. Sarai looked up at William, who had gone very still, his eyes fixed on the photograph. I remember that day, he whispered. I came to see her one last time before I left for Europe. I didn't know, I had no idea she was pregnant. But this says baby Sarai, Adrian pointed out. If you didn't know she was pregnant, I must have come back after Sarai was born, William said, his voice thick with emotion. I have no memory of it. Those were difficult times for me. There was a period when I was drinking heavily. Evelyn had gone very quiet, her face a mask of shock as she stared at the photograph. Harold appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? He demanded. Jason spoke up, his voice strong despite the intimidating surroundings. We're finding out the truth, sir, that your father-in-law is my sister's grandfather. Harold took in the scene, the open box, the photograph being passed from hand to hand, the stunned expressions. Is this true, William? He asked. William nodded slowly. It appears so, though we're still waiting for the DNA results to confirm it. I think this is confirmation enough, Sarai said quietly, holding up one of the letters from the box. These are love letters from William to my mother, and this... She opened the small velvet box to reveal a simple diamond ring. Must have been an engagement ring. I gave that to Celeste the night before my father confronted me, William confirmed, his voice breaking. I asked her to marry me. She said yes. A heavy silence fell over the grand foyer. Even Evelyn seemed at a loss for words, her usual cutting remarks silenced by the evidence before them. It was Jason who finally broke the silence. So what happens now? Does this mean Sarai's a Lancaster? Does she get a share of all this? He gestured around at the mansion. Jason, Sarai warned, embarrassed by his directness. But William stepped forward, looking Jason straight in the eye. Yes, young man. If Sarai is my granddaughter, and it certainly appears that she is, then she is entitled to a share of the Lancaster fortune, as are you, as her brother." "William!" Evelyn gasped. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," William replied. "It's time to right an old wrong. It's time for the truth to come out, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for some of us." He turned to Sarai, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. "I can never make up for the years that were taken from us. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to be a grandfather to you now. Better late than never, as they say." Sarai looked at the photograph in her hand. Her mother, so young and beautiful, the baby that was her, and the man who should have been her grandfather all along. Everything she thought she knew about her past had changed in an instant. "I think," she said slowly, "that my mother would have wanted that." Adrian moved to her side, his hand finding hers. "We'll figure this out together," he whispered. "All of it." As they stood together in the grand foyer of the Lancaster mansion, Adrian, Sarai, Jason, William, Harold, and Evelyn, the old house seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this new chapter would bring. The truth was out now, impossible to ignore or deny. The only question was what they would all choose to do with it. The 3 days following the discovery of Sarai's true heritage were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. The DNA test results, when they arrived, merely confirmed what the photograph and letters had already proven. Sarai was indeed William Lancaster's granddaughter. For Sarai, the revelation brought a strange mix of feelings. There was anger at the circumstances that had kept her from knowing her true family, sadness for her mother, who had carried this secret to her grave, and confusion about what it meant for her identity. She had always been Sarai Monet, daughter of Celeste, the girl from the South Side who worked hard for everything she had. Now she was also Sarai Lancaster, heiress to one of Chicago's wealthiest families. "You don't have to change your name," Adrian assured her as they sat in her small apartment kitchen drinking coffee. "Being a Lancaster by blood doesn't mean you have to become someone else." Sarai sighed, turning the warm mug between her hands. "It's not about the name, it's about what comes with it, the expectations, the history, the money." "Money you're entitled to," Jason pointed out from where he lounged against the counter. "Mom struggled our whole lives, and now we find out we could have been living in a mansion. It's not right." "No, it's not right," Sarai agreed. "But taking William's money won't change the past. It won't bring Mom back." Adrian reached for her hand. "Think of it this way. It's not about taking anything, it's about accepting what's rightfully yours, what would have been yours all along if things had happened differently." Sarai wasn't entirely convinced, but she had to admit there was truth in his words, and there was something powerful about claiming her place in a family that had once rejected her mother. "I have a meeting with William and his lawyers tomorrow," she said. "He wants to discuss arrangements, whatever that means." "Want me to come with you?" Adrian offered. She squeezed his hand gratefully. "Yes, please. You're the only one who makes any of this feel normal." Jason cleared his throat. "What about me? I'm her brother. Shouldn't I be there too?" Sarai looked at him with understanding. "Of course you should, Jace. You're as much a part of this as I am." The lawyer's offices were in a sleek downtown high-rise, with views of Lake Michigan. Sarai felt out of place among the expensive furnishings and well-dressed professionals, despite Adrian's reassuring presence beside her. Jason, on the other hand, seemed to take it all in stride, accepting a cup of gourmet coffee from an assistant as if he'd been visiting corporate law firms his entire life. William was already waiting in the conference room, along with 2 distinguished-looking attorneys. To Sarai's surprise, Harold Lancaster was there as well, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming," William said, standing to greet them. "I know this must feel overwhelming." "A bit," Sarai admitted. William gestured for them to sit. "I've asked Harold to join us because, as the current CEO of Lancaster Industries, he needs to be involved in these discussions. But I want to assure you that the decisions we make today will be guided by what's fair and right, not by corporate interests." Harold shifted uncomfortably in his chair but didn't contradict his father-in-law. The older of the 2 attorneys opened a folder. "Miss Monet, or should I say Miss Lancaster, we've prepared several options for you to consider regarding your inheritance rights." "I haven't decided to change my name," Sarai said quickly. "Of course," the attorney nodded. "That's entirely your choice. Now, as Mr. Lancaster's granddaughter, you are legally entitled to a significant portion of his estate, as well as potential claims on Lancaster Industries, which was founded by your great-grandfather." Jason leaned forward eagerly. "How significant are we talking?" The second attorney cleared his throat. "Based on Mr. Lancaster's current will and holdings, approximately $42 million, plus a 20% stake in Lancaster Industries, that would be held in trust until Mr. Lancaster's passing. Sarai felt the air leave her lungs. $42 million. That's just the liquid assets and properties, the first attorney clarified. The stake in Lancaster Industries would be worth considerably more. Jason let out a low whistle. Harold's jaw tightened visibly. This is too much, Sarai said weakly. William leaned forward. It's what would have been yours had I done the right thing 50 years ago. It's what your mother should have had to provide for you and your brother. But we've done fine without it, Sarai insisted. We don't need millions of dollars. Perhaps not, William acknowledged. But it's not about need. It's about legacy, about what's rightfully yours. Harold spoke for the first time. There are other considerations as well. The Lancaster name carries weight in this city, in business circles. Having an unknown granddaughter suddenly appear, it complicates things. Adrian bristled. Are you suggesting Sarai should take less than she's entitled to, because it might be awkward for the company? I'm suggesting that there might be a compromise that serves everyone's interests, Harold replied carefully. Such as? William asked, his tone wary. Harold straightened his tie. A lump sum settlement, generous but private. No stake in the company, no ongoing connection to Lancaster Industries. You want to buy her off, Adrian said flatly. I want to be practical, Harold countered. Lancaster Industries employs thousands of people. Its stability affects more lives than just our families. Sarai had been quiet, listening to the men discuss her future, as if she weren't in the room. Now she spoke up. What about the building, the one William offered us for our design firm? The Wabash property? William nodded. That's separate from all this. It's my personal holding, not part of Lancaster Industries. It's yours regardless of what else you decide. Jason frowned. But it's worth what, a few million? That's nothing compared to 42 million plus company shares. It's enough, Sarai said, a decision forming in her mind. More than enough. Sarai, Adrian started, concern in his voice, you don't have to settle for less than... I'm not settling, she interrupted gently. I'm choosing. She turned to William. I want the building for our design firm. I want a reasonable trust set up for Jason's education and future. And I want a foundation established in my mother's name to help single mothers who want to study art or design. William smiled, pride shining in his eyes. All reasonable requests. What else? That's it, Sarai said simply. I don't want millions sitting in a bank account. I don't want shares in a company I know nothing about. I want to build something of my own. With Adrian. Harold looked stunned. You're turning down the inheritance. I'm redirecting it, Sarai clarified, to purposes that would matter to my mother, to creating something new instead of fighting over something old. Jason started to protest, but Sarai silenced him with a look. We can discuss your part later, she said firmly. The attorneys exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. William, however, was beaming. My granddaughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion, has her mother's wisdom and more. He turned to the lawyers. Draw up the papers as she's requested. The Wabash building, a trust for Jason, and a foundation in Celeste Monet's name. Harold seemed relieved but puzzled. You're really walking away from all that money? Sarai smiled. I'm walking towards something more valuable, Mr. Lancaster. A future I choose, not one handed to me. When they left the lawyers' offices, Jason was still fuming. I can't believe you did that. $42 million, Sarai. Do you know what we could have done with that money? We'd have lost ourselves, she replied calmly. Money like that changes people, Jace. Not always for the better. But your education is taken care of, your future is secure. Isn't that enough? He shook his head in disbelief. You're crazy, both of you. He shot a look at Adrian. I thought at least you would back her up on getting what she deserves. Adrian put his arm around Sarai's shoulders. She got exactly what she deserves. The freedom to make her own choices. That's worth more than any inheritance. Jason threw up his hands in frustration. I'm going back to campus. Let me know when you both come to your senses. As they watched him storm off, Sarai sighed. He'll understand eventually. Maybe, Adrian agreed. Or maybe he'll always think we're crazy. Does it matter? She smiled up at him. No. What matters is what we do next. And what's that? Let's go see our building, she suggested. Our future. The Wabash Avenue building was even more impressive than Sarai had imagined. Built in the 1920s, its Art Deco facade featured intricate stonework and bronze details that had developed a beautiful patina over the decades. Inside, though dusty from disuse, the spaces were magnificent. High ceilings, huge windows, original terrazzo floors. It's perfect, Sarai breathed as they walked through what had once been the main banking hall. Can you imagine what we could do with this space? Adrian was already sketching on a small pad he carried. The main design studio here, client meeting rooms along that wall, maybe a gallery space in the front. We could restore all the original details, Sarai added excitedly, but update the systems, make it energy efficient. A perfect blend of past and future, Adrian agreed, just like us. As they explored the 6-story building, making plans and dreaming aloud, Sarai felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This was right. This was the path she was meant to take. On the top floor, they discovered a surprise, a large rooftop garden, overgrown but still beautiful, with views of the city in all directions. Your grandfather must have known about this, Adrian said as they stood among the tangled rose bushes and ivy. It's like something out of a dream. My mother loved gardens, Sarai said softly. She always planted flowers, even when we barely had enough for rent. She said beauty feeds the soul when food is scarce. Adrian pulled her into his arms. We'll restore it in her honor, a garden in the sky. As they stood there, surrounded by the faded beauty of the past and the bright promise of the future, Sarai felt a sense of peace settle over her. Her mother had loved a Lancaster man once, just as she did now. But unlike her mother, Sarai wouldn't have to choose between love and security. She could have both, on her own terms. I love you, she said, looking up at Adrian. Not because you're a Lancaster or despite it. Just because you're you, he kissed her softly. And I love you, Sarai Monet. Always have, always will. 3 months later, the grand opening of Lancaster Monet Design was the talk of Chicago's architectural and design communities. The beautifully restored Wabash building gleamed in the spring sunshine, its bronze details polished to a warm glow, its facade cleaned to reveal the original creamy limestone. Inside, the main hall had been transformed into a showcase for their design philosophy, respecting history while embracing the future. Original architectural elements stood alongside modern sustainable features, creating a space that felt both timeless and cutting-edge. The guest list for the opening was impressive. City officials, business leaders, and design professionals mingled with friends and family. Jason, who had eventually come around to Sarai's decision, especially after seeing the building, proudly guided guests through the exhibits of their planned projects. William Lancaster, looking healthier than he had in years, moved through the crowd with an almost youthful energy, introducing Sarai to everyone as my granddaughter, the visionary behind this firm. Even Harold had shown up, though Evelyn had declined the invitation. He seemed genuinely impressed by what they'd accomplished. I have to admit, he told Sarai as they stood looking at a model of their first major commission, an affordable housing development designed to be both beautiful and sustainable. You've created something remarkable here. Thank you, she said. That means a lot coming from you. Adrian seems happy, Harold observed, watching his son across the room, deep in animated conversation with the city's planning commissioner. Happier than I've ever seen him at Lancaster Industries. He's doing what he loves, Sarai said simply, with people who believe in him. Harold nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that's a lesson for all of us. He hesitated, then added, Evelyn may never come around, you know. She's set in her ways. I know, and that's okay. Sarai smiled gently. Family isn't always about everyone getting along perfectly. Sometimes it's just about making space for each other to be who we are. Harold considered this, then raised his champagne glass slightly. To making space, then. To making space, she agreed, touching her glass to his. Later, as the evening wound down, Sarai found herself on the rooftop garden, now restored to its former glory with climbing roses, wisteria, and carefully tended flower beds. Fairy lights twinkled among the plants, and soft music drifted up from the party below. Adrian joined her, loosening his tie with a sigh of relief. I think we can call this a success. Definitely, she agreed, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around her waist. I keep thinking about how far we've come in just a few months. From maid and millionaire to business partners and... He paused, reaching into his pocket. Well, hopefully more than that. Sarai's heart skipped as he pulled out a small velvet box, not unlike the one they'd found in her mother's things, but newer, shinier. I was going to wait for a more private moment, Adrian said, his voice suddenly nervous. But this place, this night, it feels right. He opened the box to reveal a ring, not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a unique design with a central sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, set in a pattern that echoed the Art Deco motifs of their building. "I had it designed specially," he explained. "The sapphire is the same color as your eyes." Tears blurred Sarai's vision as Adrian dropped to one knee on the rooftop garden. "Sarai Monet," he said, looking up at her with all the love in the world, "you've changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You helped me find the courage to follow my dreams. You showed me what real strength looks like. Will you marry me?" Around them, the city lights twinkled like stars, and from below came the sounds of laughter and music. This moment, Sarai knew, was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her and Adrian, but for both their families. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Adrian Lancaster, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Sarai thought of her mother. She would have loved this garden, this moment, this man who valued Sarai for exactly who she was. Somehow she felt Celeste was watching, smiling down on the daughter who had found her way home by forging her own path. 6 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Sarai and Adrian were married in the rooftop garden of the Lancaster Monet building. It was a small ceremony, with only their closest friends and family present. Jason, now thriving in his senior year of college and interning at a tech company, stood proudly as Sarai's man of honor. William, looking distinguished in a grey suit, walked her down the aisle that wound through the garden paths. Even Evelyn had come, standing stiffly beside Harold, her face unreadable but her presence a small step toward acceptance. As Sarai and Adrian exchanged vows under an arbor draped with wisteria and roses, the late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light. Sarai wore a simple ivory gown, elegant and understated, with her mother's earrings and the sapphire engagement ring as her only jewelry. "I promise to stand by you through whatever comes," Adrian vowed, his voice steady as he slipped a wedding band onto her finger. "To build our life together on a foundation of trust, respect, and love." "I promise to be your partner in all things," Sarai replied, placing his ring on his finger. "To share your dreams and challenges, to create with you a home where we can both be truly ourselves." When they were pronounced husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. As they turned to face their loved ones, Sarai caught sight of William, tears streaming unashamedly down his lined face. Later, during the intimate reception held in the gallery space of their building, William approached them, a small wooden box in his hands. "I have something for you both," he said, "a wedding gift, but also perhaps a peace offering, a bridge between past and present." Inside the box was a set of keys, old-fashioned heavy brass keys, and a faded photograph. "These are the original keys to this building," William explained, "and this is a picture of your mother and me, Sarai, standing right here in this very room when it was still a bank. We were dreaming of turning it into something special together." Sarai traced the image with her fingertip, seeing her mother's bright smile, the love evident in the way she leaned toward William. "Now you two have made that dream come true," William continued, his voice thick with emotion. "In a way, better than we ever could have imagined." Adrian put his arm around Sarai, drawing her close. "Thank you for trusting us with this place, with its history, and with its future. You've honored its past while making it your own," William said, "just as you've done with the Lancaster name." That evening, after the guests had gone and they stood alone in their rooftop garden under a canopy of stars, Adrian turned to his new wife with wonder in his eyes. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be standing here with you as my wife, in our own building, running our own successful firm, you wouldn't have believed it," Sarai finished for him. "Neither would I. Life is full of surprises," he mused, drawing her into his arms for a dance to music only they could hear. "Some better than others," she agreed, resting her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. Below them, Chicago stretched out in all directions, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. The city where Sarai had once cleaned houses to make ends meet. The city where Adrian had once felt trapped by his family's expectations. The city that was now the canvas for their shared vision. "You know," Adrian said softly as they swayed together under the stars, "they all laughed when I said I was bringing the Maid to the Gala." Sarai smiled up at him. "And now?" "Now," he said, "they remember your name. They remember the night you walked in and rewrote the story." "Our story," she corrected gently. "Our story," he agreed, bending to kiss her as the city lights twinkled around them like 1,000 witnesses to a love that had defied expectations, overcome obstacles, and ultimately changed everything. In the end, Sarai Monet Lancaster, hadn't needed a fortune to find her place in the world. She'd needed courage, determination, and the love of a man who saw her not as a maid or an heiress, but simply as herself, the most beautiful woman in the room, no matter what room she was in. The end.